Welcome to Selling in the Age of AI.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So,
Must-listen podcast for sales professionals who lean into technology without leaning on it. Dive into the future of sales with your host, the dynamic and inspiring Frank Somma, renowned keynote speaker, best-selling author, seminar leader, and business coach. Get ready for game-changing insights and strategies that value technology but place humanity at the top of the sales pyramid.
All right, benvenuti a tutti. Welcome everyone to Selling in the Age of AI, the podcast where we respect the tech but place human-to-human contact squarely at the top of the sales pyramid. I'm Frank Somma, and today I have Kevin Hubschmann, comedian, entrepreneur, and business professional, who founded Laugh.Inc., the parent company of Laugh.Events, and the Laugh.RX newsletter. Through Laugh.Events, Kevin has produced and hosted hundreds of corporate comedy experiences, including custom improv workshops, virtual comedy shows for remote teams, and in-person comedy shows for corporate audiences, all designed to help professionals build trust, creativity, and collaboration through laughter. Kevin blends comedy, improv, and behavioral science to create engaging learning experiences that make professional development both fun and meaningful. Kev, I'm so excited to have you on.
thanks for having me, Frank. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man. I mean, the thing that jumps out at me is comedy and behavioral science. Bridge that for me.
Yeah, so to give you a little background, our business really started to blow up during the pandemic. I went full time on the business in 2020, literally right during the pandemic, and it was right when people started to get locked up in their homes and had to stay inside and couldn't interact with anybody anymore. And, I started throwing these corporate shows, and we used to only do the shows for, we called them after work audiences. But when we shifted to corporate audiences, we started to do the shows, and then we'd get a post-event survey filled out by them, and they would be telling us like, whoa, that was amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I know the show is good. Like, these are great comedians. That's why I hired them. But the way that they were reacting, they were like, I really needed this laugh. This was something that was desperately needed, or I haven't seen my team in so long. I finally was able to feel connected to them, or, I was so sick of all these transactional relationships of emails and Slack. It's fun to finally be able to connect with people on a way that's not about work. And it was at that moment where I was like, man, we're doing something more than just providing comedy entertainment. And that's when I started researching a lot more on, okay, what is the actual ROI of this kind of investment that companies can make as it relates strictly just to the entertainment? And I'll get into the professional development side later.
Yeah.
But, we worked with Harvard psychologist and professor Dr. Natalie DiTillo, and we started diving deeper into it. Harvard Health even wrote a really great article on us called "Are You Having a Laugh and Why Not?" Talked about Dr. DiTillo and her work with us, but there's so many cool things that happen biologically when we laugh. When you laugh, you get a rush of endorphins, and so you got that feel good chemical going. And then when you're laughing, that your cortisol levels drop, and so you're getting that stress hormone is going down. And then when you're laughing with other people, you're also getting the hormone of allowing people to connect with one another, oxytocin. So you're getting that social bonding and social connection. So your body is kind of like regulating in this moment, and it's really this perfect reset. And so just from a standpoint of, man, laughter is good for us, and laughter in the workplace is maybe somewhere where you'd never find it. So it was this moment where, like, we got to keep going down the road with this. This has a lot of opportunity.
This is extraordinary because, a lot of what we do on the podcast and what I publish my book about is that human-to-human contact is essential. So, of course, the podcast, Selling in the Age of AI, because we use it all the time. I mean, I love AI engine. I was on a meeting right before we got on the podcast with a company that does amazing work with bots that, become part of your business development team and so on and so forth. And I love all that stuff. But what was interesting, what you said to me, is that in a world of email, Slack, etc., people were dying to get back together. And what better way to have you and a team of comedians come in and make it fun to get together?
Yeah, and it was really great too because a lot of the comics we were working with, they were legally not allowed to work. They weren't allowed to go into clubs, they couldn't go and perform in theaters that they were used to. So they were stuck at home being like, where can I also get my like this is my purpose and this is my goal. I love connecting with audiences and humans. So it was also really fun to engage and connect and really start to work with other comics on a way that was a lot deeper because I would be able to see like, hey, what influences these comics and what is their passion, what is their purpose. And it was very amazing to see like even on their end, sure, it's a gig, it's money, but like they loved that connection. You just saw, I would get these texts after from the comics being like, man, that was a lot of fun. I still get those texts from comics be like, what a group, that was crazy. And I'm on when I'm on these shows and we're doing the virtual ones too, I'm like, I've heard these jokes 1,000 times and I'm still laughing because the energy is electric. And
Yeah,
we work with huge companies that seemingly don't have an ounce of humor in their workplace. So
right.
when they take a break for 15 or even up to an hour, 15 minutes up to an hour, like it's just so needed. You just like hear that relief and it's just really special. And but entertainment was just the tipping point. It was when we really started to say like, okay, how can, as I'm getting deeper into this comedy world and working with comics more, I'm starting to see like all of their skill sets and all of the things that they're doing, whether it's to connect with an audience or just like taking risks themselves.
Right.
Those are skills that us as business professionals can really use. And that's something that we all can learn from comics. And that's when we started to get into what I call laughing and development.
Okay, I want to hear about put a pin in that. I want to hear about
Yeah.
laughing development. I want to go back to the beginning though. So, did you begin as a stand-up, doing open mic nights and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I started doing comedy in 2013. We started doing improv. My brother was like, out of college, you don't have a job, come live with me and like try to pick up some jobs. And so I worked at a startup for free. I worked at my friend's dad's restaurant as the worst waiter you've ever seen. And then I was doing improv as well. And so we would do that was like my world. And so I was just like, let me dive deep into improv. And me, my brother, and my other brother, and my best friend, we created a group called the Brothers in Flaws. And we were doing 3 hours of improv a week. We pushed all the furniture out of my brother's apartment, made this small area, and just laughed our butts off for 3 hours a week. And just like it was the most fun I've ever had.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And so I just kept going and I was just seeing how okay, I'm leveling up a little bit outside of this, stage. It's helping me listen better, act better, collaborate better. So I kept doing stand up. I kept or I said kept doing improv. Eventually I moved into doing stand up, started doing more open mics, started doing what they call bringer shows where you bring a big audience, like all your friends and family. And then I said, you know what? One night I brought like 50 people to a show. I was like, man, I got a little bit of an audience. Let me throw my own show where I can have unlimited time on stage. I can start to create the comedy experience with comics who I think are really funny, not setting up a show where my friends have to sit through 12 other comics that are just as bad as me.
Right. Right.
And that's how Laugh.Events was born. It was like, let me produce these great shows, let me host these great shows, let me get these reps, but most importantly, let me be able to rub elbows with these just elite craftsmen and craftswomen and these people that are so good at what they do. And that's really been the best benefit is like I've worked with the best comics in the world and I can say that with no doubt.
Now, how did we cross over into a corporate gig?
The pandemic. My old CEO from this company, so I worked for free at that company for a little bit. Eventually, they hired me as their first salesperson, and I did well for them, and built that team. out. I think by the time I left, it was like 20, 25 people.
Nice.
And I was like one of the foundational members there. And it just got to a point where my passion for comedy really was taking off. And I was like, I want to just do comedy. I don't know what that means. But my old CEO gave me a call in the middle of the pandemic and he was like, I think you got to do corporate gigs. I think you got to start like, I think you should do this one and start doing private ones. So first it started with like friends and family wanting to do private
Sure.
stuff and birthday parties. And then, a lot of companies had budget. And that's really where I said, hey,
Yeah.
that's where
It's
we're going to go
visionary.
towards is people that are actually looking to spend in this, not from their personal bank accounts, but from their business coffers, where, otherwise during that time, they weren't spending anything on in person,
Right.
as you know. So that's where we went with it.
That's amazing, amazing, amazing. And what was the name of that company?
Splash.
Okay.
Yeah, just got sold to Cvent last year, and
Okay.
so that was a nice little cherry on top exit and closing chapter.
God bless. That's great. So when you were talking before about how improv helped you to listen better, jumped out at me. So in a lot of the sales training I do, sales coaching, sales work, whatever, it's always about listening better, asking better questions, and listening better. So when you get into a corporate situation, you do some improv exercises like in workshops, or is it strictly stage performance?
Yeah, so let's go back and going back to that laughing and development, taking the
Yeah.
pin out. That's exactly what that is. So when people started to get back more in person, I was like, "Hey, you want an entertainer?" And they were like, "Yeah, but not really. It's not the holiday season, or we don't have a reason to celebrate. That's not what we're investing in." So that's when I started to try to say, okay, this is what we can offer. We can start to create our own professional development and team building
Awesome.
business side of things because that's what people wanted to invest in is connection, training. How do we actually have a real measured um, I said ROI before through like laughter, but now the ROI could be measured through like sales conversions or like
Okay.
ideas created. And there's like such amazing case studies out there from companies like Google, Salesforce, Pepsi, that like when they incorporated applied improv training, they
Yeah.
saw crazy business results. I think Salesforce saw a 30% increase in sales conversions when they were training their BDR reps. I think that was the role. Google saw an increase in idea generation of like 25%.
Unreal.
Uh, Pepsi saw an increase in like um, critical crisis management situations. So it was like all of these different aspects. So that's when I said, hey, I did sales and the corporate world, and I know this world really well. I did it for about 7 years. Let me go partner with the best applied improv instructors in the world, and let's put our head together and let's expand this out and offer this throughout the country. And that's what we do, and that we call it Laughing in Development. And it's a series of improv exercises that are set up specifically on like what does that company want to accomplish? Is it professional development? Is it just being silly and having fun and like bringing your own authentic self out to work? Is it, hey, we have a goal of listening to our customers better. Like when we get to, I love doing the sales stuff because like that's my world. Like I lived in that. I was in
Yeah.
that world. So, when they're like, hey, we want to decrease our talk time with our customers. It's like, okay, great. I got a bunch of exercises that'll be good for listening and not interrupting people. Or, we want to, we're not getting all the information we could out of our call. All right, let's focus on like curiosity and asking more questions and again, not pitching, but listening. And so there's hundreds of different improv exercises that you can do that improvisers use and stand-ups use to level up their stage and performance. And
Okay.
so we're just taking that, putting our own professional development spin on it from working with the Fortune 500 and my own experience, and then we're delivering laughing and development.
Can you give me some examples of how improv, like, I have two questions because this is so, I could talk to you for 3 hours. I know we have to get out of here, but yeah, really, because it's so interesting to me because I love that you're taking something because in my life in sales development and coaching people and training companies, etc., I relied on a lot of improv stuff that just came to me organically.
Yeah.
As I'm doing research, I found some things and I'm like, oh wow, that's a great exercise. I should try that. But I don't know the world like you do. So I'm interested to know, can you tell, we've got salespeople, sales managers, etc., listening. Are there some couple of examples you can give us of exercises that you do with people so they ask better questions, number one? And then I'm also interested in how you sell this service. Like, don't big ass tough CEOs go, what? I want an improv guy. I want Fortune 500 sales training. Like, how do you get across to somebody that, yeah, this is fun, but it's also going to make your people better?
Yeah, I'll start with that question, then I'll go into the more specifics. But yeah, that was a big challenge for me. I was in the B2B sales world myself for 7 years, and like what I prided myself on was hustle, grind, like crafting that perfect email. I mean, I had this one of my best stories that I love saying is like we're working with this huge retailer and I thought they were the perfect customer for us. And I just like I was doing my research late at night. I was like, I gotta get these folks. So I created a 10 email cadence, which now crazy. You would never do that. But back then I was like, let's do it. And I was, doing all of this and the cadence didn't work. And I was like, you are not showing who you are. You're not being the authentic version of yourself. And like kind of a couple of weeks earlier, my boss had actually said this phrase to me when my new manager, and he had said, after hearing me on a call, he said, Kevin, I've hung out with you outside of work. You're fun to hang out with. You're great to talk to. I need you to stop being so salesman and start being more Hubschmann. And that rang so clear in my mind that on that 10th email, I sent them a meme from Titanic when they're looking for the bodies that say, is anyone alive out there? Can anyone hear me? And it popped. I
Yeah.
got the meeting. That meeting turned into a meeting with more decision makers. That decision makers turned into procurement. Procurement turned into a 3 year, six-figure deal per year. One of my biggest, like, new vertical our business was working on, and it was just this amazing, like, you just brought yourself out of it. You brought yourself into it. And so, anyways, that was just a separate story of what I did. But how do we get the business? What I like to focus on is first, who knows about improv? Let me focus on the people that get it, they want to do it, they're looking for it, they believe in it. And that's a small population
I
of
was going to
people.
think, yeah, that's a needle in a haystack, man.
It's a needle in a haystack, but those people, it's a lot faster. That's bottom of the funnel. That's like really where it's like, okay, we can get that going.
Okay.
The other folks are folks that are like, where you're like, oh, I think I'm already doing improv and I just need to be educated about it. So what do I do first? I don't ever say it's improv. That's the number one thing I do. I call it laughing in development because improv people go, I don't want to do that. Like I've seen Whose Line Is It Anyways? They're really good. I don't want to be performative. Or I've seen like people make fun of improv in like a movie because of theater,
Oh, sure.
whatever it might be. So it's got this. I wrote an article on my newsletter about it called "Improv is a Dirty Word," and it's because like people hear that and they get freaked out. So I had to change the marketing of it too, and I had to just take a step back and say, "There's going to be people at the bottom of my funnel that get it. Let's talk about those people. Let's focus on them." And then there's the real group, and that's education. And so I had to change how we talked about it. I had to start delivering stuff like ROI, all of those data sets. So I started looking up a lot more case studies because I had companies being like, this is awesome and we're seeing it really valuable. So I started looking up case studies of like, okay, what's actually been seen at really big companies and how can we leverage that data? So that was a big thing is like, yeah, you might think it's whatever and you might want this like Fortune 500 sales training, let's
Yeah.
let's get 40% better, whatever that may be. I still think those are fantastic, but this is a new opportunity to like do something slightly different, slightly unique, look at the house from a different angle to see what doors you can go into. And yeah, it just comes the data speaks for itself. People hear that 30% conversion rate from that case study and they're like, Okay, that's worth giving a shot. 30% increase in conversions,
I mean,
like,
yeah, that's interesting, but there's a lot of that stuff out there, right? So sales folks have a lot of these claims of this thing works or it
yeah,
worked in that situation. Um, I can go out and say, I want to hire, Tony Robbins International to train my sales team,
yeah.
and it's a super safe decision. And I think one of the most important things that you understand as a salesperson is not necessarily that you're selling your thing
Hmm.
and people are buying it because you positioned it perfectly, and they're not. In other words, they're not buying the potential of what's great about it. What you're doing as a salesperson is helping them to mitigate risk. They don't want to make a bad decision. They don't want to get into a program for 6 months and go, sorry, $50,000 budget line, I just blew it. We're going to try a different lead source now. Zoom info didn't work, so we're going to try Accentuate and this did.
Hmm.
So I don't know how that conversation begins. Like I'm Joe Sirius, CEO, and somebody's going to call me up and say, "I'm going to make your people laugh, and they're going to sell more." Like,
Yeah.
how do
What
you even start? Like I'm
Yeah, so
so
what I
curious
start
about
is, you can go to the CEO and the CEO's got ultimate budget, or you can create champions within the company
it.
and you
Okay.
start smaller. You start with the manager and you start with the manager that needs to prove ROI. And you
Yeah.
start with people that are going, we're doing a company offsite, and the options are a booze cruise or a murder mystery. And you go,
Right.
bingo. That's like very fertile ground. And I think that's where, for me, I'm going, how do I build trust? And it's not too different than what I would do in B2B software sales. I'm building those champions internally by going, what are your problems? And let me help you look really good by solving your problems. And then when it comes to creating an enterprise deal, that's when you can go up to the CEO and say, this is all we have. So I'm also doing a lot of post-event survey with these people, with these managers, and I'm building a business case that when it's time, when we've maybe done 5, 6, 7 events throughout a year with a company, we have a lot of repeat business. When we're able to do that, I'm able to say, hey, after a year, I can't tell you what your business success was. That's really on you. You're not giving me that data. But what I can tell you is like how people are connecting to this experience. So now when you're evaluating what you want to do and the consistency in which we've worked across your whole org, that's when the CEO will pick their head up and say, well, if my team's connecting to it, that's one of the problems that we have. We're spending all this budget, and I'm looking at this line item going, what the hell did we just spend all this money on this team building event for? Like, why are we going on booze cruises? We have to hit quota.
Yeah.
So it allows us to build that business case, build champions internally so that, the events speak for themselves.
That's a big point, right? So I can do something frivolous as a team building experience, and that's okay too, right? It's
Hmm.
part of life. We want to have fun. But what you're saying is when you do a seminar with folks or you're teaching improv, if I'm understanding you right,
Yeah.
then you're doing something that kind of might be not as frivolous as a booze cruise, right? There is a serious benefit here, but it's just as much fun.
Exactly. And that's why we call it laughing and development. It's that play on learning and development,
Yeah.
but laughing is like in improv, the biggest misconception is that you need to be funny. It's actually the number one thing you're not supposed to be on your mind. Just like in sales, when you're selling, you're not supposed to be selling and you're not supposed to be pitching. And so what you're supposed to be doing is listening and thinking on your feet and finding opportunities to where you can kind of jump in and add value and build on things. So that's what improv is. It's
Yeah.
being a really good scene partner with someone and you're saying, how can you make a choice? I'm going to follow that choice. I'm going to build on that. I'm going to use words and communication now I'll get into like the exercises people can
Please.
think about, but like that allows people to, really go in on that, and it's a very successful um, opportunity for that. And so when it comes to exercises that people may do, I love to talk about this one where it's simply about communication. Because again, another one of these things is like I lost my train of thought, so I'm going to go back to it. The laughter is a byproduct of being in the moment and being present and listening and talking and communicating effectively. And that is something that, like, if you're sitting in a seminar, you're going to get a lot of value out of it and you're going to feel engaged.
Mhm.
But when in what we're doing is like people are actually participating in these things that have nothing to do with pitching and their sales things. It's kind of like, I like to say it's like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, and suddenly they're just, they're like,
Yeah.
why was I washing this car the whole time? And then they're kicking Johnny's butt uh, on the Halloween
Yeah, yeah,
movie.
that's a great analogy, man. That's a great analogy.
Um,
Yeah.
so the exercise that I love to do as well is like, okay, how you communicate to people is so important. So let's all go around a circle and we're going to a picnic and everyone's going
Mhm.
to bring something to the picnic. And I'm going to start. But the first time we go around, the words you use to connect your partners are going to be the words no, but. So I'll say, hey, I'm bringing a blanket. And then Frank, you might say, no, but I'm bringing a speaker. So you hear that and people go around and you're like, man, this picnic kind of sounds like it's like everyone's doing their own thing. Like this doesn't feel that collaborative. Then you do it again and you say, okay, now we're going to go through and we're going to say yes or. So I'm bringing a blanket. Frank, you'll say yes or I'm bringing a speaker. And you're like, okay, this is kind of getting a little better, but still, those words that you're using, the or, it's kind of stopping the train a little bit and you're pausing to say this is my idea. But when they go around the last time, once they felt that pain of the first two times, you say now you're going to say yes and. So I'll say I'm bringing a blanket, and Frank you'll say yes and I'm bringing a speaker, and then someone's like yes and I'm bringing a cooler, and it's like the energy is electric, and you're building on that momentum, and you're noticing how the words that we use, whether that's with a teammate or with a client, like they might say something, but if you interrupt them just with a word of no or but or, those words can make a whole difference on how you're connecting with them from that P2P standpoint, as I see behind you. So that's like really where you're able to make an authentic connection to
Mhm.
people and you're not selling them, you're connecting with them.
Super interesting too. I mean, so my background is NLP, and when I'm doing work on coaching sales, it's always about similar. It's not improv, but similar to understanding that if I'm talking to Kevin and Kevin says a lot of I see what you mean, and gee, that's clear, Frank. Then I'm going to realize that Kevin's talking in visual words. I'm not going to say, you feel me?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to connect. So it's that ability to listen beyond reading body, facial cues, that kind of stuff. And I'm super interested in the improv exercises because like you were saying, it keeps you in the moment. And
Hmm.
I think sales professionals, first of all, we both agree, and we've seen energy in person is significantly stronger than energy on this video medium, which is
Hmm.
significantly stronger than energy on the phone, which is significantly stronger than energy in an email, right? So
Hmm.
that's our hierarchy of communication.
Yeah.
So when you get together, it's very hard if you're a salesperson that has to meet numbers, etc., to not think ahead too far and be thinking about, oh, I got to do this and this and this and make sure that I get this deal, and rather just being present and doing this improv thing like you're talking about. That's really what you want to do with your customer.
Exactly. And what you said reminds me of my favorite phrase that I learned in improv that I used today when I was in like I was at a meetup today of and a bunch of people and I had something I really wanted to say, but I kept getting interrupted. But then I said, okay, pause for a second. And what comes through my brain is what you hear, what I was taught early in my improv career, which is F your good idea. And it's this thing that you tell yourself you don't have to say your idea. You can pause, you can listen, you can sort of reset the thing that you were dying to say because that might not be as relevant. You might write it down and say, I'm going to bring it up later. But it's this idea of like I can teach you all these different improv games and exercises, but it's those things that you take away from them and you're able to draw back of being like, hey, did we go to a picnic there or did I learn about yes and or but? Or am I, doing this scene and I'm pausing myself from talking? Did I learn about like the scene where we were astronauts on space, or did I learn to not jump in front of my partner with my own idea because I thought it was better. And you teach yourself, F your good idea, and let's listen and let's hear what the person, especially a customer, if they're talking, they want to talk and they want to tell you their problems. And if you're telling them how to solve their problems without listening, you're
I gotta write that
losing
down.
before you start.
I have to write. I'm taking notes as you're talking, even though I have recording, but I tend to want to write stuff down. So it reminds me a little bit of, as a writer, you're taught in editing, don't be, the expression probably, don't be afraid to murder your darlings.
Yeah,
And it's you write stuff and you become in love with your own prose and you have these pieces. But when you go through and you edit really hard and you get rid of that stuff, what comes back is this cleaner copy, which then prompts you to go someplace you might not have gone. And it
totally.
sounds like that's what you're saying to me.
That is what I'm saying. And that's like, that's also why I talk about improv, but I also talk about my experience as a stand-up, and I still do stand-up comedy because it is my training. Because when you write, there's a joke that you fall in love with. You're like, man, this joke kills. I laugh. I've had audiences that laugh, but then you realize it like doesn't work as well as you thought. And you're like, all right, I got to cut that part. And then something else emerges. And something else emerges because you decided to be really, you tried to make a big change and cut out a theme that you were trying to hammer. And then you realize how loud another joke happened, and then you go, that's the one I got to tag. That's what they call tagging, like adding more stuff into a joke. Like
Yeah.
when you hear a laugh, that's what they, in comedy, in stand-up specifically, when you hear a laugh, it's an invitation to like hit them super hard. It's like if you remember that game Mike Tyson Punch Out, when the guy's like going and falling away, and it's that time for Joe to punch Mike Tyson out because he's like, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what a tag is. And so you find out this opportunity like, okay, I murdered my darling only to find the
Yes.
best joke that I had. And
Yes.
now I get to work on that and hammer it. And now I get to build that momentum and like hammer it away.
Yeah, because that joke wouldn't come had you clung to your good idea. And I think it's a very, wrapping it back around to business and sales folks, that's it. Don't go in with these preconceived notions of what you're going to do. Get away from scripts. Yes, you have to not have an idea of your business, but mostly if you ask people good questions and earn the right to ask even deeper questions, you will create a bond with someone. And the information, the more you listen, the bigger the opportunity becomes. And also, paramount in that is knowing when it's not your gig. And you go,
Mhm.
yeah, this is not, it's not for me. You got to be willing to walk away too. But listening, it's huge.
And listening to yourself, like listening to the customers, listening to yourself. And like, that's why call recordings are important. And that's what stand-ups record their calls all the time. They record their sets and say, what was that moment? What was that like breath I heard or reaction that I heard? Let me take that and compound the success that I have. And what I got very lucky at, inadvertently, not knowing I was doing this, when I decided to stop taking the path of like, I'm going to do open mics and then open mics to comedy clubs and get a late set and then just kind of work my way into the club scene. When I took it into my own hands and said, I'm going to focus on reps and reps in front of audiences that are receptive and going to give me feedback,
Yep.
that's when I was able to, instead of working on like, I got to get 10 minutes, I wrote new 10 minutes every single night.
Yeah.
And I was able to take sometimes 2 minutes from that set, sometimes 10 seconds from that set.
Right.
But
Right.
what ended up being was a 10-minute set that I developed over like 5 years that I was really happy with. And it was because I was so focused on like listening to the audience, listening to myself, not being obsessed with the script. And obviously, those comedy skills with improv help you as well, know when to identify when you got to bail.
Awesome, man. Listen, I know we're up against the clock, so before I let you go, I want to ask you, are you doing anything with any charitable organizations, volunteer time, giving money, anybody you want to shout out that you think is doing a particularly good job?
So we do a comedy series called A Comedy Show for Charity,
Okay.
and so I encourage anybody if you have a charity that you want to work with, especially if you're in the New York City area specifically, we always love to partner with charities that are looking to a unique way to fundraise. And so we found that comedy was a really great way to get out of the, you know, sometimes the dark side of the charity, and really everyone comes out and laughs and has a lot of fun and celebrates life. And when they're celebrating life and they're really excited, also those same people open up their pockets. So like
Yeah,
that's like where fundraising comes in. And we've had really great charity events where we've raised up to $100,000, but just because of the auction that we do, because people are in such a good and happy mood. So shout out to the partners that we've worked with before. We've done stuff with Cycle for Survival for Memorial Sloan Kettering. That's an event we've done every year.
great.
The an SN8 foundation as well. Yeah, we just basically tried. Oh yeah, the RFK Human Rights Foundation. So it's all opportunities to bring together a community of people, to have them laugh, and if they have an opportunity with the right people in the room, have them open up their pockets and be
Sure.
like, yeah, I'll pay 10 grand for a round of golf. Let's do it.
That's great. I love it. I love it. I love it. Kev, the biggest takeaway for me is don't be so salesman, be more Hubschmann. I thought that was genius. You should have tattoo that on your wrist. And I mean it resonates.
Right here?
There it is. That resonates with everyone. All of the folks that are listening, all the people that we deal with all of the time. It's really the key. Like what that guy said to you is, don't be so salesman, salesperson to be, PC, but be you. And
Yeah.
you know what? When you're you and you lose, it's you brought yourself and you didn't win that one. When you try to put something on and you lose, then you're going to have regret about why you did it that way. So it's a great everything that you said is a great takeaway. I could talk to you for 2 more hours, and
Well, hopefully we get another
reach out
chance to
do that
chat. We
again.
can build out that 2 hours. I'm ready for it.
All right, let's do it again. Kev, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and we'll let you know when the episode's coming out, and I hope we can recommend one another to different places. I know places that could use you instantly. My God, it'd be great.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate that. And yeah, same here. I'd love to find ways for me to connect you with people that we've worked with in the past that could be a good fit.
I'm going to end the recording here. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you being on.
All right, you have a good one.
Ready to take your sales team or event to the next level? Visit franksomma.com to discover how Frank can coach your top performers, deliver a tailored workshop for your team, or captivate your audience with a content-packed keynote at your next event. Frank's best-selling book, B2B is really P2P, is now available on Amazon and Frank's website. Here's a special offer. As a valued listener, mention this podcast when you contact Frank and receive a 10% discount on your first coaching session, keynote, or workshop booking.
That's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Selling in the Age of AI. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all of the topics we discussed, and of course, to connect with our amazing guests. I have to shout out big love to my production team, Neeks, Angelo, Nico of Digital Presence. You guys rock. If you want your digital presence to explode, check these guys out at digitalpresence.team. And until next time, remember, people can't point and click you. Be the difference maker for your prospects and clients.